Prayer and worship, growing in our practice of prayer and worship. Prayer and worship are two vital elements of a believer's life. But how do we go from a surface knowledge to a deeper understanding and more vibrant prayer and worship life? In regards to prayer, we will discuss perseverance in prayer, brave prayers, and praying the Psalms. Next, we will discuss questions regarding worship. Are we worship leaders or followers? And what does a worshipful lifestyle look like? There are three items we will touch on regarding prayer. Perseverance in prayer, a reminder to keep on praying even when the prayers seem unanswered. Brave prayers, praying the big prayers that seem impossible. And praying the Psalms, a practical application of using the Old Testament in the modern day believer's prayer life. There are three items we will touch on regarding prayer. Perseverance in prayer. This is a reminder to keep on praying even when the prayer seems unanswered. Brave prayers, praying the big prayers that seem impossible. And finally, praying the Psalms, a practical application of using the Old Testament and the modern day believer's prayer life. It can be so easy to give up on prayer. We pray for something for years and it looks like nothing is happening, but this is where we need to persevere. Corrie ten Boom is a great example as she had perseverance in prayer. She shares a story of when she had prayed as a child for the people living on the lane behind her house. This lane was known for its ungodly activities. Years later, she ran into someone who had grown up on this very lane, and this person had found salvation. Corrie ten Boom's childlike faith reminds us to have faith like a child while we are persevering in prayer. I was part of a church plant years ago. I prayed for the town and invested in the church plant, but unfortunately, our plant did not grow. In fact, it died. However, years later, I discovered that there is a thriving Assemblies of God church in the very town that I prayed for. While I may not have been there to see my prayer answered, I heard about it years later because I persevered in prayer. Brave prayers are the prayers that need God to do the impossible. In the bravest prayer, Mark Batterson describes how he prayed for years for his asthma to be healed, and yet it did not look like it was going to be healed. However, years down the road, he was healed and was able to run a marathon. I have also experienced answer to brave prayer. Recently, I was praying about a retreat for survivors of abuse. While meeting with local church leadership, they mentioned to me that they just happened to have 26 acres of land that the district was trying to figure out what to do with. And someone had just happened to have a vision of housing on that land, which sounds a lot like a retreat for survivors. Praying the Psalms is a great way to integrate the Old Testament into daily prayer life. An example would be to pray Psalm 100. In the NIV, it says in Psalms 100, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs." To make this psalm into a personal prayer, it could be rephrased, "God, I am joyful when I think of all you have done in creating the earth and the blessings in my life. I am so very glad for the work you did with Jesus' death and resurrection." It's easy to take the Psalms, make them personal, and integrate it into our prayer lives. Related to prayer is worship, which is another aspect in a believer's healthy spiritual life. The questions we will look at is, worship leader or worship follower? And what does a life of worship look like? As a worship leader, it is important to consider the question, are we leading others into God's presence or ushering in the presence of God? The answer is no. We do not lead people into God's presence or usher in his presence, since he is omnipresent and always present. While it might be trendy to say this, the better way of looking at this is to see the worship leader as a pastor. A pastor shepherds and teaches his flock by example, which is exactly what is done when leading worship. The question then follows, are we a worship follower or a coach in worship? And the answer is yes. We need to be both. In worship pastoring, it is important to coach the flock as well as follow our own guidance for worship. No one wants to follow someone who does not practice what they preach. There are some misconceptions we want to discuss regarding worship and worship as a lifestyle. Is worship just singing, or is it just for Sunday? The answer is no. Worship is living for God in our everyday lives because He is worthy. And singing is just one of many ways we worship. We can worship through our jobs by being good employees, and we can worship while doing chores. Part of worship is a heart attitude towards these everyday things. We have discussed how prayer and worship are two vital elements of a believer's healthy life, and how we can have a deeper and more vibrant prayer and worship life. We can persevere in prayer, pray the brave prayers, and pray the Psalms. We can live a lifestyle of worship and be more than worship leaders and coaches. We can be followers and worship pastors in our everyday lives.